The sunlight filtered gently through the tall bay windows of Eniola's spacious yet quiet home, casting golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. It was a beautiful morning, but Eniola sat motionless at the edge of her bed, staring at the framed photo of her children on the nightstand. The smile on her face in the picture felt distant now, almost as if it belonged to another woman. Eniola was a 45-year-old African woman whose presence exuded elegance and resilience. Her smooth, cocoa-toned skin seemed to glow with an inner strength, and her sharp, almond-shaped eyes held a wisdom earned through years of triumphs and tribulations. A celebrated lifestyle consultant, she had built a thriving career, helping countless clients find balance and beauty in their lives. To the outside world, she was the epitome of success, but within, she carried the invisible scars of heartbreak and disappointment. Her divorce, finalized 2 years earlier, had left deep emotional wounds. Eniola's marriage of nearly 2 decades had crumbled under the weight of unmet expectations and emotional neglect. She had given everything to her family, prioritizing their happiness above her own. Yet, in the end, it hadn't been enough to keep her husband's love or loyalty. Betrayed and blindsided, Eniola had been forced to rebuild her life while shielding her 2 teenagers, Femi and Dara, from the full brunt of the storm. Femi, now 16, was growing into a young man with an independent streak and a quiet determination. Dara, at 14, was her mother's mirror in many ways, strong-willed, creative, and fiercely loyal. They were Eniola's anchors, the reason she had fought so hard to rise above the pain. But even as she put on a brave face for her children, the pressures of single parenthood weighed heavily on her shoulders. Managing the household, navigating teenage moods, and ensuring their needs were met, all while excelling at her demanding job, left her emotionally drained and yearning for something more. It was in the quiet moments, late at night when the house was still, that the full weight of her loneliness settled over her. Memories of her failed marriage played in an endless loop, each one a sharp reminder of the love she'd lost and the trust that had been broken. She had spent countless hours questioning what she could have done differently, until one day, she decided to stop. Enough. The word echoed in her mind like a revelation. Eniola realized that she had given enough of herself to the past, to guilt, and to regret. It was time to shift her focus. She made a solemn promise to herself. She would no longer live solely for others. It was time to rediscover Eniola, the woman beyond the mother, the ex-wife, and the professional. Her first step toward that promise began with small changes. Mornings now started with workout sessions by the large windows where she could watch the sunrise and feel its warmth on her skin. She began journaling, pouring her thoughts and dreams onto crisp pages. She signed up for a cooking class she'd always wanted to take, but had never found time for. Most importantly, she started saying no. No to overextending herself, no to toxic relationships, and no to the inner voice that told her she wasn't enough. Her friends, impressed by her transformation, encouraged her to take a well-deserved vacation. At first, Eniola hesitated. She had never traveled alone before, and the thought of leaving her children, even for a short while, filled her with guilt. But Femi and Dara, ever supportive, practically pushed her out the door. "You deserve this, Mom," Dara said, her expressive eyes filled with sincerity. "We'll be fine. Go and have an adventure." And so, Eniola found herself on a plane to Bali, with nothing but a suitcase and a heart determined to heal. The decision felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She had no set itinerary, no grand plans, just a desire to embrace life's simple pleasures and rediscover what truly made her happy. As the plane descended, Eniola peered out of the window, her heart fluttering with anticipation. The rugged cliffs, turquoise waters, and vibrant landscapes promised a world of beauty and new beginnings. For the first time in years, She felt a spark of excitement, a reminder that life still held surprises for those brave enough to seek them. What Eniola didn't know was that Bali would offer more than just breathtaking views and a temporary escape. Fate had something extraordinary in store for her. Among the Bali's winding paths and serene beaches, she was about to cross paths with someone who would challenge her beliefs, awaken her heart, and change her life forever. As Eniola stepped off the plane, the air was thick with the humid warmth of the Bali coastline. Her senses were overwhelmed by the symphony of crashing waves, distant chatter, and the tangy scent of salt in the breeze, a stark contrast to the bustling, cold sterility of what she had left behind. But Bali was hers. The sprawling resort was like something out of a dream, with its cascading infinity pools, vibrant gardens, and villas that seemed to melt into the natural landscape. Eniola's room overlooked the sea, a vast expanse of shimmering blue that seemed to whisper promises of renewal. She stood on the balcony, allowing herself a rare moment of vulnerability as tears welled in her eyes. "You made it," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with emotion. "You deserve this." She unpacked slowly, savoring the simplicity of the task. Each neatly folded dress, pair of sandals, and silk scarf felt like a piece of herself she was reclaiming. She chose a flowing white sundress for her first evening, its simplicity mirroring her mood, hopeful yet unassuming. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and lavender, Eniola wandered to the resort's beachside restaurant. The soft glow of lanterns lit the path, their flickering light casting shadows that danced on the sand. The restaurant was bustling yet serene, a harmonious blend of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soothing melody of live acoustic music. She took a seat by the edge, where the sea's lullaby was clearest. As she scanned the menu, a waiter approached with a warm smile. "Welcome, ma'am. May I recommend our signature cocktail? It's a local favorite." Eniola nodded, allowing herself the indulgence. "Why not?" she replied, her tone carrying a hint of newfound freedom. As she waited, she observed her surroundings. Couples leaned into each other, their conversations intimate. Groups of friends clinked glasses in celebration. For a fleeting moment, she felt the pang of loneliness, but she pushed it aside. This was her time, her space. She wasn't here to dwell on what was missing, but to embrace what could be. When the drink arrived, she raised her glass in a private toast. "To me," she murmured, smiling as the sweet, tangy flavors danced on her tongue. Eniola had always carried herself with quiet dignity, a trait that now drew the attention of those around her. She noticed a man seated a few tables away, his gaze lingering. He was younger, perhaps mid-30s, with striking features that seemed vaguely familiar. His dark eyes held a hint of curiosity, but Eniola's years of experience taught her to feign nonchalance. She met his gaze briefly, offering a polite smile before turning her attention back to the sea. This man was Yoo-jun, a South Korean actor whose face was plastered across billboards and magazine covers throughout Asia. To him, Eniola was an enigma. She hadn't done a double take, whispered to a friend, or even seemed to recognize him. It was refreshing, almost disarming. He found himself intrigued by her poise, the way she seemed entirely content in her own company. As the evening wore on, their paths crossed once more, this time at the dessert buffet. Eniola reached for a plate of exotic fruits at the same moment Yoo-jun did. Their hands brushed briefly, and she looked up, startled. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft but steady. "No, it's my fault," Yoo-jun replied in fluent English, his voice smooth and tinged with amusement. There was a pause, an unspoken connection hanging in the air, before they both smiled and stepped back to let the other go first. Eniola returned to her table, feeling a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. She glanced back, catching Yoo-jun's eye once more. This time, he smiled openly, a gesture that felt strangely intimate. That night, as she lay in bed, the sound of the waves lulling her to sleep, Eniola couldn't shake the image of the man from the restaurant. She told herself it was nothing, just a chance encounter. But deep down, a spark had been lit, one she hadn't realized she still had the capacity to feel. This was only the beginning of her journey, and Bali had already begun to work its magic. The harsh glow of the camera's flash exploded like fireworks, one after the other, as Yujun navigated the crowded arrivals terminal at Incheon International Airport. His every step was a performance, each wave of his hand or polite bow rehearsed to perfection. The crowd of fans screamed his name, their voices a mix of adoration and desperation. He smiled faintly, his lips curling into the practiced expression that had become second nature over the years. Yujun's life had long ceased to feel like his own. At 37, he was at the peak of his fame, a household name not only in South Korea, but across Asia and beyond. With dazzling good looks, piercing dark eyes, and a chiseled jawline that made directors and fans swoon, he had earned his place as one of the most sought-after actors of his generation. Yet, behind the flawless exterior lay a man who felt caged by his own success. As his team ushered him into a private car, Yujun let out a sigh of relief. The tinted windows were a sanctuary, shielding him from the outside world. He leaned back against the leather seat, running a hand through his dark, tousled hair. "Another day in paradise," he muttered under his breath, his tone heavy with sarcasm. The car ride was silent except for the faint hum of the engine. His manager, Jiho, sat beside him, typing furiously on his phone. "We'll finalize the Bali itinerary tomorrow," Jiho said without looking up. "The photo shoot is scheduled for the second day, and we'll keep your schedule light after that." "Good," Yujun replied curtly. Bali wasn't just another work trip for him. It was an escape, a chance to breathe. The thought of walking along the beach, away from prying eyes, was the only thing keeping him sane. Yujun had always been meticulous about his craft. He had risen to fame through sheer hard work, transforming himself from an awkward teenager with a passion for theater into a global sensation. But the higher he climbed, the more isolated he became. His life was a series of tightly controlled appearances, each one carefully curated to maintain his image. He was adored, but not understood, admired, but not truly known. He longed for authenticity, for a moment where he could shed the persona and simply be Yujun, the man, not the star. His relationships were fleeting, often sabotaged by his grueling schedule or the invasive scrutiny of the media. The idea of finding someone who could see past the glitter and glamour seemed increasingly impossible. Arriving at the resort in Bali, Yujun felt an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. The villa was breathtaking, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was a welcome change from the ceaseless noise of his life and soul. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to relax. That evening, dressed in casual linen pants and a loose white shirt, Yujun ventured to the beachside restaurant. He scanned the room out of habit, noting the curious stares and hushed whispers of recognition. But then his eyes landed on her. She sat alone, her posture relaxed yet regal, her dark skin glowing under the soft light of the lanterns. There was a quiet confidence about her, a magnetic presence that made it impossible to look away. She didn't glance in his direction, didn't seem to notice him at all. It was disarming, even exhilarating. For the first time in years, Yujun felt invisible in the best way possible, and he couldn't help but wonder who she was. The night air was cool and inviting as Eniola lounged by the resort's infinity pool. The faint sound of waves crashing against the shore mingled with the soft jazz playing in the background. She sipped her drink slowly, savoring the serenity of the moment. For once, the ever-present weight on her shoulders seemed to dissolve into the humid Bali air. Across the pool, Yoo-jun approached with measured steps, a tall glass of something fruity in his hand. He wasn't dressed like the heartthrob plastered across glossy magazines, but instead wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans. To anyone else, he would have appeared as just another guest enjoying a quiet evening. But to Eniola, he was unmistakable. She had seen his face before, in movies, on billboards, even in advertisements that interrupted her children's YouTube videos. Yoo-jun, the South Korean star. Yet, she remained composed, determined to treat him like any other person. Celebrities deserved a chance to be human, and she wouldn't deprive him of that. As he reached for a lounge chair near hers, he stumbled slightly, the contents of his drink splashing onto the ground, droplets landing on her foot. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said quickly, his voice laced with genuine embarrassment. Eniola looked up, her deep brown eyes meeting his for the first time. She offered a warm, reassuring smile. "It's fine," she replied, dabbing at her foot with the edge of her shawl. "No harm done." Yoo-jun hesitated, unsure if he should stay or retreat. Something about her calm demeanor put him at ease, and he decided to stay. "Let me get you a napkin," he offered, turning to flag down a waiter. "There's no need," she said, her tone light. "It's just water." Their eyes met again, and for a moment, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, not awkward, and it surprised them both. Finally, Yoo-jun broke it. "You're not going to ask for a picture?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Eniola laughed softly, shaking her head. "Should I?" she countered. "You seem like you're off duty." He smiled, a genuine one this time, free of the practiced charm he usually wore. "Thank you," he said simply, taking a seat beside her. "It's rare to meet someone who doesn't immediately bring up my work." "I'm Eniola," she said, extending her hand. "And you are?" He chuckled, taking her hand in his. "Yoo-jun. Nice to meet you, Eniola." The conversation flowed easily after that, covering everything from the beauty of Bali to their favorite foods. Yoo-jun found himself relaxing in her presence, her grounded nature a refreshing change from the chaos of his usual interactions. Eniola, for her part, was intrigued by the man behind the fame, his unguarded moments revealing layers she hadn't expected. Still, a subtle tension lingered. Yoo-jun couldn't tell if Eniola truly didn't recognize him, or if she was deliberately pretending not to. And Eniola, ever perceptive, sensed his curiosity, but remained resolute in her decision to treat him like any other guest. As the evening wore on, the pool area grew quieter, and their conversation took on a more introspective tone. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked suddenly. "Tired of what?" "Being seen." He paused, considering her question. "All the time," he admitted. "But tonight, I don't feel like I'm on display, so thank you for that." Eniola nodded, her expression thoughtful. Everyone deserves a little peace. As they parted ways that night, neither of them realized that their chance encounter was the beginning of something far more significant than either could have anticipated. Fate seemed to have a playful hand in orchestrating the next few days of Eniola and Yoo-jun's stay at the resort. It began subtly, with casual nods exchanged over coffee during breakfast. By the third morning, it became apparent that their paths were more than coincidentally aligned. At first, Eniola chalked it up to the resort's intimate size, but the magnetic pull between them became harder to dismiss. Their first few encounters carried the awkward politeness of strangers thrust into proximity. At breakfast, Yoo-jun complimented Eniola on her choice of mango slices over waffles, noting, "Simple but elegant, like you." Eniola had smiled, but deflected the comment, unsure how to respond. Later that day, on the beach, Yoo-jun's laughter caught her attention as he tried his hand at surfing, failing spectacularly in the rolling waves. Eniola watched from a shaded spot under a wide-brimmed hat, chuckling softly to herself. When he emerged from the water, dripping and grinning, their eyes met. She raised her coconut drink in a mock toast, and he walked over, brushing sand off his knees. "Enjoying the show?" he asked, his voice light with amusement. "Thoroughly," she replied, tilting her head, "though I'd suggest sticking to safer pursuits. Maybe paddleboarding?" "That's a kind way of saying I should give up," he said, laughing. "Noted." The moment was lighthearted, yet there was a softness in their shared smiles, as if an unspoken understanding passed between them. It was the kind of connection both had long forgotten. As their encounters grew more frequent, their conversations deepened. It wasn't until a humid afternoon at a local market, though, that their walls began to crack. They wandered through stalls bursting with vibrant colors, scarves, spices, and handcrafted jewelry, the air rich with the scent of grilled satay. Eniola picked up a woven basket, examining its intricate design. "I like things with stories," she murmured. Jun, standing beside her, nodded. "Stories are what make things matter." She glanced at him curiously. "Do you get to tell your own story?" He hesitated, his expression turning somber. "Not often," he admitted. "Most of the time, I feel like my life isn't my own. Every move I make is judged, analyzed, and turned into something it's not. Sometimes I wonder if people even see me, or if they just see the idea of me." His honesty took her by surprise. The vulnerability in his words contrasted sharply with the poised, polished man she'd seen in photos and videos. "That must be lonely," she said softly. "It is," he admitted. "But this, being here, talking to you, it feels real. And I didn't realize how much I've missed that." Her chest tightened at his words, an ache of recognition blooming. She felt the weight of her own loneliness mirrored in his. "I know what it's like to feel unseen," she said. "After my divorce, I'd walk into a room and feel like all anyone saw was my failures. Being a single mother, especially in my culture, comes with so much judgment. Sometimes I feel like I've been living my life in pieces, trying to prove I'm enough." Jun listened intently, his gaze unwavering. "You shouldn't have to prove anything," he said. "You're more than enough." The sincerity in his voice left her momentarily speechless. It was a simple statement, but it felt like a lifeline. Their shared vulnerabilities brought them closer, and soon they began seeking each other out deliberately. They explored the island together, immersing themselves in its culture. One day, they visited an ancient temple nestled in the lush greenery. The air was heavy with incense, and the soft chants of monks created a serene atmosphere. Eniola marveled at the intricate carvings, while Jun watched her with quiet admiration. "You're so present," he observed. "It's like you see things most people miss." She smiled. "Life has taught me to notice the small things. They're usually what matter most." Another evening, they attended a traditional dance performance under the stars. The performers moved with a fluid grace, their costumes shimmering in the torchlight. Eniola and Jun sat side by side, their shoulders brushing. "Do you ever feel like you're dancing for someone else?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the performers. "All the time. But tonight, I feel like I'm finally dancing for myself." Her hand brushed his lightly, a small gesture of solidarity, and he turned to her, his expression softening. "Thank you for reminding me what that feels like." The pinnacle of their growing connection came on the night of the boat ride. Jun had arranged it as a surprise, and Eniola hesitated at first, unsure if she should accept. But something in his earnest invitation persuaded her. The boat cut through the calm waters, the sound of the waves blending with the distant hum of the resort. Overhead, the stars blanketed the sky, their brilliance reflected in the ocean's surface. They sat side by side, the intimacy of the moment wrapping around them like a warm embrace. "What's your dream?" Eugene asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Eniola exhaled slowly, gazing out at the horizon. "To find peace," she said. "To live a life that feels whole, not just for my children, but for me." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's a beautiful dream. Mine feels simpler. To be truly seen, to have someone look past everything and just see me." She turned to him, her expression tender. "I see you, Eugene." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. For a moment, the world seemed to still, the ocean's whispers the only sound. Eugene reached for her hand, his touch tentative but steady. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much that means." They sat like that for what felt like hours, sharing their dreams and fears, their laughter and silence. By the time the boat returned to shore, their connection had deepened into something neither of them could deny. They were no longer two strangers crossing paths in paradise. They were two souls finding solace in each other. The days following their intimate boat ride were charged with a new energy, an unspoken awareness that neither Eniola nor Eugene could ignore. Every glance lingered a moment too long. Every smile seemed to hold a secret, and the spaces between their words became pregnant with possibilities. Eugene couldn't stop thinking about her. Eniola's presence lingered with him like the faint scent of jasmine, subtle yet intoxicating. He found himself captivated by her grace, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. Unlike the women in his world, models, actresses, and socialites whose lives revolved around appearances, Eniola was grounded, real. Her laugh, unguarded and warm, played in his mind like a melody he couldn't shake. He admired her maturity, her ability to face life's hardships without bitterness. She was a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes, and in her strength, he found solace. For someone like Eugene, who lived in a world of relentless scrutiny, Eniola felt like a refuge, a place where he could lay down the mask he'd worn for so long. One morning, as he watched her from across the pool, her face illuminated by the soft light of the rising sun, he felt a pang of something unfamiliar, yet undeniable. It wasn't just attraction, it was deeper, more profound. He wanted to know her fears, her dreams, her scars. He wanted to be the one she trusted, the one she turned to. And for the first time in years, Eugene felt vulnerable in the best possible way. For Eniola, Eugene's attention was as flattering as it was unsettling. She wasn't naive. She could see the way his gaze lingered, the way his tone softened when he spoke to her. And while part of her was flattered, another part wrestled with doubt. She saw the gulf that stretched between them, the 8-year age difference, the chasm of cultural backgrounds, and the glaring reality of his fame. What could a man like Eugene, adored by millions and accustomed to a life of luxury, possibly see in her? She was a divorced mother of 2, her life defined by responsibility and pragmatism. She couldn't fathom how she could fit into his glittering, chaotic world. Late at night, as she lay awake listening to the ocean's whispers, her mind churned with questions. Was she setting herself up for heartbreak? Could their connection survive beyond the bubble of this idyllic resort? And yet, despite her doubts, she couldn't deny the magnetic pull between them. When she was with him, the world felt lighter, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. It was during one of their sunset walks on the beach that the tension reached its breaking point. The sky was a masterpiece of fiery oranges and soft pinks, the waves lapping gently at their feet as they strolled in companionable silence. The air between them was electric, each unspoken word adding to the weight of the moment. Eugene stopped abruptly, turning to face her. The golden light of the setting sun bathed his features, and Eniola felt her breath catch. "I've been meaning to say something," he began, his voice low and hesitant. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" He stepped closer, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Being here, with you, it's been the most real thing I've felt in a long time. You make me feel like myself again." Her pulse quickened, her mind racing even as her body seemed to freeze. "Yujun, Before she could finish, he leaned in, his hand lightly brushing her arm. His lips hovered just a breath away, his eyes searching hers for permission. Time seemed to stretch, the world around them fading into the background. But just as their lips were about to meet, Eniola pulled back, her hand coming up gently but firmly to his chest. "I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. He froze, his expression a mix of confusion and hurt. "Why not?" She stepped back, creating space between them. "Because this, whatever this is, it's complicated. You and I come from different worlds. And what happens when we leave here? When reality sets in?" "Eniola, he began, but she shook her head. "You're an incredible man, Yujun," she said, her voice steady despite the tears welling in her eyes. "But I've spent too long rebuilding my life to risk it on something that might not last. I can't afford to gamble with my heart." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the sand. "I understand," he said quietly. "But I need you to know something. Meeting you has changed me. You've shown me what it means to feel alive again. And no matter what happens, I'll always be grateful for that." Her heart ached at his words, but she forced herself to turn away. As she walked back toward the resort, the sunset casting her shadow long across the sand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just left something extraordinary behind. And yet, she couldn't ignore the voice inside her that whispered, "Is it really over?" The piece of their private connection shattered like glass when the first photo surfaced online. Paparazzi, ever vigilant and ruthless, had captured Yujun and Eniola during one of their sunset walks on the beach. The images were intimate, though innocent. A shared laugh, a lingering glance, a moment where Yujun's hand brushed hers. But in the world of celebrity gossip, such moments were enough to ignite a wildfire. By morning, the headlines screamed their speculation: South Korean superstar, Yujun romances, mystery woman in Bali. The articles dissected every detail of the photographs, scrutinizing Eniola's appearance, speculating on her age, her background, and most cruelly, questioning what she could possibly offer someone like Yujun. Social media exploded with opinions, many of them harsh and unkind. Eniola first became aware of the storm when her phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. Messages poured in from friends, acquaintances, and even strangers. Some were supportive, others prying. But the worst were the venomous comments from fans who saw her as an intruder in Yujun's life. By midday, reporters had descended upon the resort. They lingered outside the gates, cameras poised, hoping for a glimpse of the couple. Eniola, feeling hunted, locked herself in her room, her heart pounding as she scrolled through the onslaught of articles and tweets. She felt exposed in a way she never had before, her carefully guarded privacy torn apart. Yujun's reaction was immediate. When his manager, Ji-ho, brought the news to him, his face darkened with anger. "This is unacceptable," Yujun said, his voice low but firm. "I won't let them do this to her." Ji-ho hesitated. "Yujun, you know how this works. Ignoring it is the best way to let it blow over." "No," Yujun said sharply, standing. "Ignoring it means letting them treat her like she's nothing, like she's just some scandal to sell headlines. I won't do that." That afternoon, Yujun called for an impromptu press conference, a bold and risky move. The media gathered eagerly, expecting a carefully crafted statement from his publicist. Instead, Yujun faced them alone, his expression resolute. "I want to address the rumors circulating about me and the woman in the photographs," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Her name is Eniola, and she is someone who has brought light and peace into my life during a time when I needed it most." The reporters leaned in, their cameras flashing. Yuju's words were unprecedented, breaking the unspoken rules of celebrity culture. "I understand the interest in my life," he continued, "but what I can't accept is the invasion of her privacy and the disrespect she has endured. She is not a public figure. She did not ask for this attention, and she deserves better than to be reduced to headlines and speculation." His voice grew firmer. "I have the right to my personal life, to pursue happiness, just as anyone else does, and I will not apologize for that." The room erupted in questions, but Yujun stood his ground. His declaration was a gamble, one that risked alienating fans and upsetting his carefully managed image. Yet, as the press conference aired, something unexpected happened. Social media began to shift. Fans who admired his authenticity and bravery came forward, expressing their support. Hashtags like "We support Yujun" trended worldwide. In her room, Eniola watched the press conference with tears streaming down her face. She was moved by Yujun's courage and the way he had stood up for her, but her gratitude was overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. The media frenzy had already begun to impact her life. Her children's school had been contacted by reporters, and her family back home was being hounded for information. She couldn't allow this to continue. Her children's safety and well-being came first. That evening, she sat at the small desk in her room, her heart heavy as she wrote a letter to Yujun. "Dear Yujun, I don't know how to thank you for what you did today. Your words were brave and kind, and they meant more to me than I can ever express. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that we could face this together, that the connection we share could withstand the pressures of your world. But I can't ignore the reality we're up against. This isn't just about us. It's about my children, my family, and the life I've worked so hard to build. They didn't choose this, and I can't let my choices bring chaos into their lives. You have shown me a kind of love and respect I never thought I'd experience again, and for that, I will always be grateful. But I have to let you go, for their sake and for mine. Please know that this decision doesn't come from a lack of feeling, but from an abundance of it. I care for you too much to watch you sacrifice your career and your peace for me. With all my heart, thank you for everything. I will never forget you. Yours, Eniola." When Yujun received the letter, his heart broke. He read it over and over, the weight of her words sinking in. He wanted to fight for her, to prove that their connection was worth the struggle. But he also knew that her fears were valid. For the first time in his life, he felt truly helpless. As Eniola packed her bags and prepared to leave the resort, she carried a mix of sorrow and resolve. She had found something extraordinary in Yujun, but she knew that sometimes love meant letting go. The days after Eniola's departure were agonizing for Yujun. Her letter, carefully folded and tucked into his jacket pocket, became a constant reminder of the woman he couldn't let go. Every word replayed in his mind, fueling his determination. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. She had given him reasons why they couldn't be together, but none of them were enough to extinguish the fire in his heart. Yujun knew he had to act, not as a celebrity, but as a man willing to fight for the woman who had changed his life. 3 weeks after Eniola returned home to Nigeria, she found herself at the center of a vibrant cultural gala. The event was a celebration of community leaders and change makers, honoring those who had dedicated their lives to uplifting others. Eniola had been chosen for her work in women's empowerment and education, an accolade she accepted with humility. The hall was filled with dignitaries, artists, and activists. The air buzzed with conversation and the hum of traditional music, the rhythmic beat of drums adding a festive energy to the evening. Eniola, dressed in a stunning Ankara gown, radiated elegance and poise. Yet, as she mingled with the attendees, her thoughts often strayed to Yujun. She missed him more than she wanted to admit, but she convinced herself that she had made the right choice. Midway through the evening, the master of ceremonies called for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise guest tonight," he announced, his voice carrying a note of excitement. "All the way from South Korea, please welcome Mr. Yujun." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Yujun stepped onto the stage, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that highlighted his striking features. His presence was magnetic, and yet his gaze searched only for one person. When his eyes locked on Eniola's, a collective murmur spread through the room. Eniola's heart stopped. She gripped the edge of her seat, her breath caught between shock and disbelief. What is he doing here? Yujun took the microphone, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "Good evening," he began, his eyes scanning the crowd briefly before returning to Eniola. "I apologize for interrupting this incredible event, but I needed to be here tonight for someone very special." The audience leaned forward in anticipation, their curiosity piqued. Yujun continued, his voice growing stronger. "In my life, I've stood on countless stages, faced cameras, and performed for millions of people. But tonight, I stand here not as an actor, but as a man who has found something worth risking everything for." He paused, letting his words settle over the room. "Eniola," he said, his tone softening as he looked directly at her. "You've taught me what it means to be seen, truly seen, and loved for who I am, not what I represent. You've shown me a strength and beauty that I didn't know I was missing." A hushed silence enveloped the room as he stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "I know there are challenges. Our age, our cultures, the lives we've built thousands of miles apart. But love doesn't recognize borders or expectations. Love only knows truth." Tears welled in Eniola's eyes as Yujun's voice cracked with emotion. "I'm not here to disrupt your life," he said, his sincerity palpable. "I'm here to be a part of it, if you'll let me, because you've already become an irreplaceable part of mine." The audience erupted into applause, a few people wiping away tears. Eniola sat frozen, her mind racing. Every rational argument she had constructed to keep him away crumbled under the weight of his words. As Yujun stepped down from the stage, the room seemed to hold its breath. He approached Eniola, his hand extended, his expression a mix of hope and vulnerability. "Eniola," he said softly, "this is me, choosing you. Will you choose me too?" Her heart thundered in her chest. For a moment, all she could hear was the echo of his words. She thought of her children, her responsibilities, the risks, but then she thought of the joy he had brought her, the way he made her feel alive again. She thought of the courage it must have taken for him to stand before her tonight, to lay his heart bare. Rising to her feet, Eniola took his hand, her tears spilling freely now. "Yujun," she said, her voice trembling but resolute, "loving you scares me, but the thought of losing you scares me even more." His smile was radiant, his relief evident as he pulled her into an embrace. The audience erupted into cheers, the air thick with celebration and the promise of something extraordinary. In that moment, Eniola realized that her happiness was just as important as her children's. By choosing love, she wasn't abandoning her responsibilities. She was showing her children the courage it takes to pursue a life filled with meaning and connection. As they stood together, their hands intertwined, Eniola and Yujun knew their journey was only beginning. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, they were ready to face whatever came next, together. The aftermath of their public declaration was a whirlwind, thrusting Eniola and Yujun into the harsh spotlight of global scrutiny. For weeks, their faces dominated headlines, their names on the lips of everyone from gossip columnists to social media influencers. But amidst the chaos, they clung to each other, determined to weather the storm together. From the moment Eniola met Yujun, her world had been turned upside down. What began as a chance encounter had evolved into something she never thought possible. Love that made her feel seen, cherished, and alive. But with that love came doubt, and it clung to her like a shadow, whispering fears she couldn't ignore. In the quiet moments, when the world fell away and it was just her thoughts, Eniola wrestled with uncertainty. She'd stand at her bedroom window, staring out at the moonlit streets of Lagos, her mind a storm of what-ifs. What if this isn't real? What if I'm just a fleeting distraction for him? The headlines still haunted her. Even though Yujun had defended her publicly, the sting of cruel words lingered. She replayed the hateful comments in her mind, each one a jab at her insecurities. She's too old for him. What could he possibly see in her? She's just using him for attention. These voices, though faceless, felt louder than the reassurances Yujun had given her. And yet, every time she looked into his eyes, she saw something undeniable. Truth. He loved her, and he wasn't afraid to show it. So why couldn't she let herself believe it? One evening, after tucking Dara and Femi into bed, Eniola stood before her bathroom mirror. She studied her reflection, tracing the faint lines on her face, the gentle sag of her jawline. She thought about the years she had spent sacrificing, giving every ounce of herself to her children, her career, and the expectations placed upon her by society. When did I forget how to live for myself? Her mind drifted to her marriage. It had been safe, predictable, but it had also been lonely. She had poured so much of herself into being the perfect wife and mother that she had forgotten her own desires. After the divorce, she had vowed to never lose herself again. And yet, here she was, questioning whether she deserved the happiness she had found with Yujun. Am I holding back because I'm scared? Or because I don't think I'm enough? The thought hit her like a lightning bolt. She wasn't just afraid of the media, or the cultural differences, or the age gap. She was afraid of believing she deserved this love, only to have it ripped away. The next day, as Eniola helped Dara with her art project, her daughter's words pierced through her doubts. "Mom," Dara said, her voice soft but firm, "you've been smiling more lately. I like it." Eniola paused, her brush hovering over the canvas. "I have?" Dara nodded. "It's because of him, isn't it? Yujun." Eniola's heart skipped a beat. "He makes me happy," she admitted. "Then why do you always look sad when you talk about him?" Dara asked, her innocent question cutting to the core. Eniola sighed, setting the brush down. "Because loving someone like him isn't easy. There are so many things that could go wrong." Dara tilted her head, her young face thoughtful. "But what if it goes right?" The simplicity of her daughter's perspective struck Eniola. She realized that in trying to shield her children from potential heartbreak, she had been teaching them to fear happiness. That wasn't the legacy she wanted to leave. That night, Eniola took out a notebook and began to write, not to Yujun, but to herself. It was a practice she hadn't done in years, a way to organize her thoughts and confront her fears. Dear Eniola, you've spent your whole life being strong for others. You've carried burdens that would break most people, and you've done it with grace. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that you deserve joy too. This love isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated, and it scares you. But isn't that what makes it real? Isn't that what makes it worth fighting for? Yujun sees you, not just as a mother or a professional, but as a woman. He sees your beauty, your strength, your heart. And for the first time in years, you feel alive. Don't let fear take that away. You've taught your children how to be brave. Now it's time to show them how to be happy. The next time Yujun called, Eniola's voice was steady. her resolve clear. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us." He held his breath. And I don't want to run anymore," she said. "You make me happy, Yujun, and I'm ready to fight for that no matter what it takes." His relief was palpable, his voice filled with emotion. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." As they spoke, Eniola felt a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was living, and it felt glorious. From that moment, Eniola's doubts no longer held her captive. She embraced her happiness with open arms, knowing that while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, it would be worth it. Her transition from fear to courage wasn't just for her. It was for her children, her family, and for the love that had taught her to believe in herself again. And as she stood beside Yujun, facing the world together, she knew she had made the right choice. Throughout Eniola's journey with Yujun, her children, Femi and Dara, had been both her greatest source of joy and her deepest concern. As a mother, Eniola's love for them guided every decision she made. And now, as her relationship with Yujun deepened, their acceptance of him became one of the most important pieces of her new life. Femi and Dara's first impression of Yujun was cautious, to say the least. Femi, at 16, was protective of his mother in a way that often made him seem older than his years. Dara, 14 and more openly emotional, alternated between curiosity and wariness. The idea of their mother dating a world-famous actor felt surreal and, frankly, intimidating. When Yujun visited Lagos to spend time with them, he approached the situation with humility. He didn't try to win them over with grand gestures or charm. Instead, he focused on building genuine connections. But Femi and Dara weren't easily convinced. One evening, as Yujun helped Eniola prepare dinner, Femi watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "Why are you really here?" he asked bluntly. Yujun turned to him, unshaken by the directness. "I'm here because I love your mother," he said simply, "and because I want to be a part of this family, if you'll let me." Femi's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're a big deal, you know. Everyone knows who you are. Are you sure you can handle being with someone like us? We're not fancy or famous." Yujun stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Femi, your family is everything I've ever wanted. Fame doesn't matter to me when I'm with your mom. I just want to make her happy. And I want you and Dara to know that I'm serious about being here for all of you." The sincerity in his voice gave Femi pause. He didn't say anything more that night, but his guarded demeanor began to soften. Dara's breakthrough came during a quiet afternoon. She was working on an art project at the dining table when Yujun walked in, carrying a sketch pad. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding up a pencil. She glanced at him skeptically. "You can draw?" "Not as well as you, probably," he admitted with a smile, "but I like to try." They spent the next hour sketching side by side, exchanging tips and ideas. By the time Eniola walked in, she found them laughing over Yujun's attempt at drawing a cat, which looked more like a blob with legs. "He's not bad," Dara said later, showing her mother the sketch pad. "For a beginner." There was a twinkle in her eye that Eniola hadn't seen in weeks, and it warmed her heart. The true turning point came during a family soccer game in the backyard. Femi, a skilled player, had challenged Yujun to a match, half expecting the actor to fumble and fail. But to everyone's surprise, Yujun held his own, his athleticism and competitive spirit shining through. When he scored a goal against Femi, Dara burst out laughing. "I didn't know you could actually play," she exclaimed. "I've picked up a few skills over the years," Yujun replied, grinning. Femi, though initially frustrated, extended a hand to Yujun at the end of the game. "You're not bad," he said grudgingly, a hint of respect in his tone. "Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment," Yujun replied, shaking his hand firmly. The moment marked a shift in their relationship. a silent acknowledgement that Yujun had earned his place. One evening, as Eniola sat on the porch watching the sunset, Dara joined her, her expression thoughtful. "Mom," she began, "I think you've been really brave." Eniola turned to her daughter, surprised. "Brave? How so?" "For letting yourself be happy again," Dara said. "I can see how much you love Yujun, and he really loves you too. You deserve that." Tears welled in Eniola's eyes as she pulled Dara into a hug. "Thank you, my darling. That means more to me than you know." Later that week, Femi approached Yujun while they were cleaning up after dinner. The two worked in silence for a moment before Femi spoke. "You know, I've always tried to protect my mom. She's been through a lot, and I never wanted her to get hurt again." Yujun set down the dish he was holding and looked at Femi. "I understand, and I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make her happy. She means everything to me." Femi nodded, his expression serious. "Good, because if you hurt her, you'll have to deal with me." Yujun smiled, sensing the protective love behind the words. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Femi's lips twitched into a small smile. "Welcome to the family, Yujun." By the time Yujun returned to South Korea, he left with the assurance that he wasn't just a visitor in Eniola's life. He had become a part of her family, earning the respect and affection of her children. Femi and Dara, once hesitant, now saw him as someone who truly cared for their mother and for them. As Eniola watched Yujun playfully tease Dara over her latest sketch, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her family had grown in ways she never imagined, and their love, messy, imperfect, but undeniably real, was the glue that held them together. Navigating their unconventional relationship proved to be a delicate dance. The long-distance aspect was one of the first hurdles they faced. With Yujun returning to South Korea for work and Eniola rooted in Nigeria with her children, the miles between them were both a physical and emotional strain. Yet, they found ways to bridge the gap. Late-night video calls became their lifeline, where they shared their days, laughed over small moments, and supported each other through challenges. Public scrutiny was relentless. Paparazzi followed Yujun's every move, hoping to capture glimpses of his private life. Online forums were ablaze with debates over their relationship. Critics fixated on their age difference and cultural backgrounds, while others questioned whether a global star like Yujun could genuinely be with someone so far removed from the glitz and glamour of his world. But through it all, Yujun remained steadfast. In interviews, he spoke openly about his love for Eniola, emphasizing that their connection was built on mutual respect and understanding. "She is my peace," he told one journalist. "In a world that often feels overwhelming, she reminds me of who I truly am." Eniola, though more private, found her strength in his unwavering support. While she struggled with the invasive nature of the media, she refused to let it define their relationship. Her focus remained on her children and her work, both of which grounded her in the face of the chaos. "He's not what I expected," Femi admitted to Eniola one evening. "He's just normal, and he really cares about you." Those words filled Eniola with a quiet joy. Watching Yujun seamlessly integrate into her family's life was a balm to her worries. He wasn't just her partner, he was becoming a part of her world. Later, Eniola traveled to South Korea to experience Yujun's life firsthand. The cultural differences were stark, but she approached everything with an open mind. From navigating bustling markets to attending formal events, she saw the pressures and expectations Yujun faced daily. Yujun's decision to bring Eniola into his life wasn't just a battle against public opinion, it was also a deeply personal challenge. His family, rooted in traditional values and protective of their son's image, greeted the news of his relationship with Eniola with hesitation. They loved him dearly, but their concern was palpable. When Eniola arrived in Seoul to meet Yujun's family, Her nerves were a tempest beneath her composed exterior. Yujun reassured her with every step, his hand a steady anchor in hers. "They'll see what I see," he said softly. "Just be yourself." The family home was an elegant blend of tradition and modernity, its warm tones and carefully curated decor reflecting the refined tastes of Yujun's parents. His mother, Mrs. Kang, greeted them at the door with a polite smile, her eyes scanning Eniola with subtle curiosity. Mr. Kang, Yujun's father, stood nearby, his expression reserved but not unkind. Dinner was an exercise in diplomacy. The conversation flowed politely, though it was clear that Yujun's parents were holding back their true feelings. They asked Eniola about her work, her children, and her life in Nigeria, their questions courteous but distant. Yujun's younger sister, Ji-eun, was the only one who seemed openly warm, her enthusiasm cutting through the tension. But as the evening wore on, the underlying doubts began to surface. "You must understand," Mrs. Kang said delicately. "We only want what's best for Yujun. His life is complicated. The scrutiny he faces is relentless. Are you prepared for that?" Eniola's heart sank, but she met Mrs. Kang's gaze with quiet strength. "I understand your concern," she replied, "and I would never want to bring harm to Yujun. I care for him deeply, and I'm willing to face whatever challenges come our way." Mrs. Kang's expression softened slightly, but the conversation ended on an ambiguous note. That night, as Yujun and Eniola returned to their hotel, he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "They'll come around," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Just give them time." The turning point came a week later, during a family dinner. By then, Eniola had spent more time with Ji-eun, who had become her staunch ally. Ji-eun's openness and affection for Eniola began to influence her parents, though they remained guarded. That evening, as they gathered around the table, Mr. Kang surprised everyone by addressing Eniola directly. "Eniola," he began, his deep voice steady, "I've watched you these past few days. You carry yourself with grace and strength. It's clear that you care for our son." Eniola nodded, her throat tightening with emotion. "I do," she said simply. He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "You come from a different world, one we don't fully understand. But I see now why Yujun chose you. You ground him. You bring him peace. And as his father, that's all I've ever wanted for him." Mrs. Kang's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she reached for Eniola's hand. "I see it too," she said softly. "You've shown us that love isn't about appearances or expectations. It's about connection. And if you make Yujun happy, then you have our blessing." The weight of their words hit Eniola like a wave, and she felt tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That means more to me than I can say." Yujun, watching the exchange, felt a surge of gratitude and relief. He squeezed Eniola's hand under the table, his heart swelling with love for the woman who had not only captured his heart, but had earned the respect of his family. From that moment on, the dynamic shifted. The Kangs welcomed Eniola fully into their lives, their initial skepticism replaced by genuine affection. Mrs. Kang took it upon herself to teach Eniola how to prepare traditional Korean dishes, while Mr. Kang shared stories from Yujun's childhood, their bond growing deeper with each passing day. Ji-eun became a fierce advocate for their relationship, frequently posting pictures of the couple on her social media, with captions like, "My brother and the woman who makes him smile like this? #Yuni forever." Her post garnered thousands of likes, further shifting public perception in their favor. By the time Eniola returned to Nigeria, she left with more than just Yujun's love. She left with the unwavering support of his family, a foundation that gave her strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. On the day of her departure, Mrs. Kang embraced Eniola tightly. "Take care of him for us," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's our son, but I can see now that his heart belongs to you." Eniola's tears returned as she nodded. "I promise," she said. "I'll cherish him always." As the car pulled away, Yujun held Eniola's hand, his eyes reflecting the joy and peace he felt knowing his family had embraced the woman he loved. They were no longer just two people fighting against the odds. They were a family united, ready to face the future together. Yujun was relentless in shielding Eniola from harm. Any journalist or fan who crossed the line faced swift repercussions. "I won't allow anyone to hurt her," he declared in an interview, his voice firm. "She has already sacrificed so much just to be with me. It's my turn to protect her." When online trolls attempted to spread rumors or post hateful comments, Yujun's fans came to their defense. The hashtag number #UAnynumber trended across social media, with supporters from all over the world sharing messages of encouragement. "Even celebrities deserve to love and be loved," one post read. "Yujun and Eniola are proof that love knows no boundaries." The tide began to shift. Public opinion softened as people saw the genuine bond between them. Men and women of all ages and backgrounds started sharing their own stories of unconventional love, inspired by Yujun and Eniola's courage. The hashtag became a symbol of hope, a rallying cry for those who believed in the power of love to overcome obstacles. The peace Eniola and Yujun had worked so hard to build was tested one last time, as if the universe needed to ensure their love could truly withstand all odds. Just as they seemed to settle into a rhythm, a storm began to brew, one neither of them saw coming. It began with a leaked video. A seemingly innocuous clip of Eniola and Yujun walking hand in hand during her visit to South Korea surfaced online. The video, taken by a fan, quickly spiraled out of control as rumors and speculation ran rampant. The headlines were brutal. Yujun's mystery woman, a gold digger? Fans outraged as Yujun's romance threatens his career. The video even spawned conspiracy theories, with some alleging that Eniola had orchestrated the relationship to boost her own profile. The vitriol reached Eniola's inbox, where hateful messages accused her of being unworthy of Yujun. Eniola, though resilient, found herself shaken. She had never sought fame or attention, and the relentless negativity weighed heavily on her. Worse still, the scrutiny began to affect her children. Femi, usually stoic, admitted that classmates had begun whispering about their family. Dara, sensitive and artistic, retreated into herself, her usually bright demeanor dimmed. Yujun, furious at the intrusion, addressed the situation publicly. In a heartfelt livestream, he condemned the harassment and defended Eniola once again. "She is the most extraordinary person I've ever met," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "She is not a public figure, and she should not have to endure this simply because she loves me." While his words drew support from fans, the backlash also intensified. Some accused him of prioritizing his relationship over his career. The weight of it all began to strain even their strongest moments. Amidst the chaos, a misunderstanding threatened to drive a wedge between them. Yujun's management team, desperate to salvage his image, began pressuring him to issue a carefully worded apology and distance himself from Eniola. When he refused, they leaked a private conversation, making it appear as though Yujun himself had expressed doubts about their relationship. The article reached Eniola before Yujun could explain. Reading the distorted words, she felt a cold pang of betrayal. Had he truly said those things? Had he been pressured into loving her, only to regret it now? When Yujun called her that evening, she answered with a guarded tone. "I saw the article," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. "Is that how you really feel?" Confused, he pressed her for details. When she explained, his outrage was palpable. "You think I would say that about you?" he asked, his voice trembling with hurt. "Eniola, I would never. You mean everything to me." But the doubt had already taken root. Eniola's fear of being a burden, of being unworthy of his world, resurfaced. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "Maybe we were never meant to fit into each other's lives." "Don't say that," Yujun pleaded. "Don't let them win. Don't let them take this away from us." The conversation ended unresolved, leaving both of them raw and uncertain. That night, Eniola sat in her living room, clutching a photo of her children, tears streaming down her face. Yujun, on the other side of the world, stared out at the city lights of Seoul, his heart heavy with despair. The next morning, Yujun made a decision. He called his manager and terminated their contract. For years, he had been a puppet, his life controlled by others in the name of fame. But this time, he chose love. He chose Eniola. He boarded the first flight to Nigeria, his resolve unshakable. Meanwhile, Eniola, still grappling with doubt, received an unexpected call from Dara. "Mom," Dara said softly, "I know you're scared, but Yujun makes you happy, and you deserve to be happy too." Those words, so simple yet profound, struck a chord in Eniola. She realized that in her efforts to protect her family, she had been denying herself the happiness she so deeply craved. And in doing so, she risked losing the one person who saw her for who she truly was. When Yujun arrived at her doorstep, he found her waiting. The look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Without a word, he took her hands in his. "I'm done hiding," he said, his voice steady. "I'm done letting other people dictate how I live my life. I choose you, Eniola. I will always choose you." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she whispered. "I'm sorry I doubted us." They embraced, the weight of the past weeks dissolving in each other's arms. Outside, the world continued its relentless chatter, but inside they found peace. The renewed media frenzy following Yujun's public statements and his trip to Nigeria was intense, but this time they faced it together. They released a joint statement, emphasizing their commitment to one another and asking for respect and understanding. To their surprise, the tide began to turn. The hashtag #UANI trended again, but this time with overwhelming support. Fans shared messages of love and acceptance, applauding their bravery and authenticity. News outlets shifted their tone, framing the couple as a modern love story defying conventions. With the tension behind them, Eniola and Yujun began building their life together with renewed strength. They learned to navigate their challenges with grace, supporting each other through every trial. Eniola's children embraced Yujun fully, and his fans rallied behind their relationship, proving that even in the harshest spotlight, love could prevail. In their quiet moments, they often reflected on their journey, marveling at how far they had come. One evening, as they sat under the stars in Lagos, Yujun took Eniola's hand and said, "No matter what happens, I'll always fight for us." And in that moment, Eniola knew they could face anything together. After months of navigating challenges, Eniola and Yujun found their rhythm. They struck a balance between their personal and professional lives, creating a partnership built on trust and respect. Yujun adjusted his schedule to spend more time with Eniola and her children, while Eniola made room in her life for their love to flourish. One quiet evening, they sat together on the balcony of Eniola's home in Lagos, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Yujun's hand rested on hers, their fingers intertwined. The chaos of the outside world felt distant, replaced by the warmth of their shared presence. "We've come so far," Eniola said, her voice tinged with wonder. Yujun smiled, his gaze fixed on her. "And we're just getting started." In that moment, surrounded by the hum of crickets and the gentle rustle of the evening breeze, they knew they had found something rare and precious. Their love was not perfect, but it was real. And as they looked toward the future, they were filled with hope and gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. The power of memory has a way of shaping love, preserving moments that seemed fleeting, but become anchors in the tumultuous sea of life. For Eniola and Eugene, the symbol of their love emerged during a quiet, unexpected moment that neither realized would define so much of their journey. It began during one of their early days together in Bali. Eugene and Eniola had wandered through a local market, the air rich with the scent of spices and the hum of bartering voices. Stalls overflowed with vibrant textiles, intricate carvings, and handmade jewelry. Eniola had paused at one particular vendor's stall, drawn to a simple yet elegant bracelet made of interwoven threads in shades of pink, orange, and gold. "This is beautiful," she murmured, her fingers tracing the delicate weave. Eugene stepped beside her, watching her expression. "Why that one?" he asked, genuinely curious. She smiled faintly. "It reminds me of resilience. The threads are fragile on their own, but together, they're strong." Without hesitation, Eugene purchased the bracelet and gently fastened it around her wrist. "Then it's yours," he said, his voice warm, "a reminder of how strong you are." Over the months that followed, the bracelet became a constant presence in Eniola's life. She wore it through moments of joy and doubt, its interwoven threads a quiet source of strength. During their most difficult days, when the media scrutiny felt unbearable, or when the distance between them seemed insurmountable, she would look down at her wrist and remember the quiet market in Bali, the sunlight filtering through the canopy, and the man who had seen her strength when she struggled to see it herself. For Eugene, the bracelet became a symbol of his love for Eniola, a love that was woven together by trust, respect, and resilience. He often found himself glancing at her wrist, reassured by the sight of the delicate threads that had come to mean so much. One day, during a particularly challenging period, Eniola's doubts threatened to overwhelm her. A hurtful article had resurfaced, questioning the authenticity of their relationship and painting her as an opportunist. Though she knew the claims were baseless, the relentless negativity took its toll. In a moment of despair, she removed the bracelet and placed it on her nightstand. Its absence felt like a loss, as if she were giving up on the hope it represented. But she couldn't bring herself to discard it completely. When Eugene visited her in Lagos shortly afterward, he noticed the empty space on her wrist. "Where's the bracelet?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her eyes downcast. "I wasn't sure if I deserved to wear it anymore," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not strong enough for all of this." Eugene knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Eniola, that bracelet isn't just about you being strong. It's about us being strong together. You don't have to carry everything alone." His words brought tears to her eyes, and with trembling hands, she picked up the bracelet and allowed him to fasten it around her wrist once more. In that moment, it felt like a promise, not just to each other, but to themselves. Years later, as they stood before family and friends on their wedding day, the bracelet made its final, poignant return. Eugene, dressed in a sharp navy suit, held a small velvet box in his hands as he faced Eniola, radiant in an intricately beaded gown. "From the moment I met you, you've been my strength," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This bracelet was the first thing I gave you, and it became a symbol of everything we've built together. Today, I want to give you something new." He opened the box to reveal a gold bracelet, its design echoing the interwoven threads of the original. This one was adorned with tiny gemstones in the same colors, pink, orange, and gold, that shimmered in the light. "This is my promise to you," he continued, "a reminder that no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together. Just like these threads, We are strongest when we're united." Tears streamed down Eniola's cheeks as she extended her wrist, allowing him to fasten the new bracelet. "It's perfect," she whispered, "just like us." The original bracelet was preserved and placed in a glass case in their home as a testament to their journey. Whenever they looked at it, they were reminded of how far they had come and the love that had carried them through. As Eniola and Eugene built their life together, the story of the bracelet became a cherished part of their family's narrative. Dara and Femi often asked to hear the tale, their curiosity sparking laughter and warmth during family gatherings. For them, it wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a lesson in resilience, love, and the power of unity. In the years to come, the bracelet's symbolism would carry on, a thread woven through their lives, binding them together in a love that was as strong and enduring as the threads themselves. The end. What did you learn from this story? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you never miss an update. Don't forget to share this video with someone who would love it. Thank you so much for watching.